Look at storm track satellite radar. Some of you, again, watching maybe from Hartford City or Bluffton, wondering what all the commotion is about, why we issued a first alert weather day. Well, most of the action is kind of in the north and headed towards northern Wells County and into Adams County. We do have, looks like we've just issued a tornado warning on the southeast side of Fort Wayne. But we're going to we're going to analyze that here in a second. But I did want to mention here, satellite and radar, that we do have quite a mass of rain with large hail, which is moving on the south side of Fort Wayne, and that could bring with it dime to quarter-sized hail. So just something to keep in mind in the hail tracks showing that there is indeed that propensity for some large hail on the south side of the city. And take a look at velocity. So again, tornado warnings was just issued on the southeast side of Fort Wayne, primarily prompted by some very strong gusty wind. There isn't a lot of identification here in velocity of some real clear rotation, but there is quite a bit of emphasis on the potential for 60-mile-per-hour plus wind gusts. This is, I think, the bigger risk here, is that whether we actually see a rotation or a bona fide tornado, which seems a little less likely than some strong straight-line wind damage, the point is, this is a particularly dangerous storm right along US 33, just south of New Haven. So I'm going to go back to the weather pod, and we're going to analyze that a bit further. But again, that is the cell that we're watching south of Fort Wayne with those 60, perhaps up to 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts. These are some of the strongest signatures we've seen near Hessen Castle, about headed eastward just south of East Tillman Road toward Monroeville. I'm looking at the tornado warning information now, so just bear with me. That stuff came literally as I went on, so just kind of taking a look at some of the information that came in. This is a cell that's not only capable of producing perhaps some rotation, but also ping-pong ball-sized hail. This would include that. Yep, I'm covering that. So we are going to continue to watch this as it moves east about 35 miles per hour. So what we're going to do is continue to monitor any sort of significant rotation we see. What I'm noticing with this particular cell is that there is more, again, gusty wind than rotation in it. And what we'll probably need to do is wait for the National Weather Service to perhaps clarify a little further what they're seeing. But again, regardless of rotation or whether it's straight line wind, the risk could be very similar because straight line wind damage can be about as dangerous, if not just as much, as a small tornado. So again, we're going to analyze that a little bit further. So let's go ahead and use our tool to, so the velocity signature showing perhaps up to about 70 miles per hour. It's about 67, 72 miles per hour. Again, this is just to the east of Hessen Castle, moving eastward between about 30 and 40 miles per hour. Now, as we zoom out and kind of get a bigger picture at what's happening, you can see that this warning is associated with a pretty pronounced cell, again, on the south side of the city, moving into northwest Ohio, and even on the north side into DeKalb County. Just some rain and a little bit of light wind. So really it is just this one cell that seems to have the capability, anyway, of producing a tornado. Again, I want to emphasize this tornado warning is radar indicated. This does not mean a tornado is on the ground. It means that there is the potential that one could form. But based on what I'm seeing here on radar, we're not seeing a lot of convincing signs of rotation, but there are some signs of some very strong wind.
Now, is this a situation where people in the Hessen Castle area over into Monroeville should be seeking shelter at this point?
Yes, and this is a classic kind of, what do I do, especially if I don't have a basement? A lot of people come in with those questions. The best thing you can do is to go to an interior space, interior room, whether that's a closet, bathroom is another place that we strongly recommend. If you have a basement, obviously try to seek shelter there. Going to the lowest level of a building is also something that we would strongly recommend. But again, even though rotation seems to be kind of marginal here, this is the strongest wind that we've seen yet with this particular cell that could produce 60 to 70 mile per hour gusts. That can produce quite a bit of damage, and although it doesn't have the circulating factor of a tornado at the present moment, that could certainly happen, but also the straight line wind damage at 70 miles per hour is certainly going to be quite a bit to kind of overcome here on the south side of Fort Wayne, moving into essentially northern Adams County, southern Van Wert County. I'm going to put on the warning here so you can actually see where that warning's located. There's kind of a lot of clutter here, so I'm going to take off the sweeping radar. There it is. So that's the tornado warning. And so Monroeville is in the path here of this particular warning. I'm going to put on sweeping radar just so you can see that in context of kind of where the tornado warning is. The core of that cell is pretty much almost due south of Fort Wayne along 27, and this is showing signs of large hail as well. So while there is a rotation risk, again, a ping pong ball sized hail as well as 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts means even if there is a tornado on the ground, it would be very difficult to see. Rain-wrapped tornadoes can happen in this kind of setup, and so that's perhaps one of the reasons why the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning, because it would be very difficult to notice something like that on the surface with wind-driven rain.
And of course, Allen County has somewhat of a storied history with straight-line winds and damage. Rather recently, folks in our community know that even if there's no tornado, straight-line winds can cause plenty of damage, right, Matt? So people should be taking shelter if you're in the southern portion of Allen County right now. Yes, and
the tornado warning indicating, of course, a tornado possible, but I would say the most convincing thing that I'm seeing on radar is the straight line wind damage. I expect actually damage is probably going to be a factor of this storm regardless. Whether we see a tornado or not, there's very likely going to be damage with this storm because of the very high wind that we're seeing. I'm using a tool which helps us kind of identify what would be called a debris signature. When we see very light, and I'm talking about almost like white kind of colors showing up that could indicate a debris being lofted toward the radar beam and thrown hundreds of feet up into the air. Not really seeing much of that right now. I am seeing some lighter returns, but nothing that's really significant at this point, which again would be generally good news. But the velocity signatures are also showing some signs of weakening as well. Still, some very high wind just outside of Monroeville. So if you are in Monroeville, head to your safe space, which would end up being either a basement or an interior room. These are the two most important things to really keep in mind, is to make sure that you're at as low a level or interior a room as possible as these very strong winds move through. And as I mentioned too, this isn't a situation where you would likely see a tornado coming toward you. With it being what we would call rain wrapped, it would be very difficult to perceive. So again, just stay in your in whatever safe space you can find that is at a lower interior room until the tornado warning is expired. That tornado warning is expected to expire at 6:15 p.m. The hope is that the National Weather Service will update us a little bit on kind of some of their thinking as to some of the evolution of the storm, maybe some things that we're not seeing. But again, I would say that straight line wind damage, as well as potentially the risk of some rotation, seems to be the prominent feature of this storm. Those who've followed our tornado coverage in the past have probably noticed those sharp greens and reds that kind of hook one on another. That means that wind is spiraling in kind of within itself. And we're not really seeing that prominent hook feature. That's not necessarily meaning that a tornado, again, can't happen in that kind of environment. I would just say that I'm seeing more evidence, rather, of just some very damaging wind gusts. But either way, that tornado warning, as small as it is, seems to be moving east-southeast here fairly quickly. And it should be moving into northwest Ohio, northwest side of Van Wert County, I would say at about 6 p.m. or so. We should end up seeing most of that moving into Van Wert County. And whether or not the tornado warning is extended certainly remains to be seen. But at this point, we have a couple severe thunderstorm warnings in effect. There weren't really a whole lot of signs of strong wind up until about 10 minutes ago, as the cell just south of Fort Wayne kind of blew up and started to show signs of some intense wind, which I'll show you here. You can see as that cell moved out of Columbia City, and we were talking during our first weather forecast, we weren't really seeing much other than maybe some gusty wind. But as this cell moved to the south side, you see how it just began to really blossom and provide wind speeds, or at least estimates here, of about 60 to 70 miles per hour. As we advance the clock farther east, you can see that it does look a little more washed out, but keep in mind too, this is moving farther away from the radar beam, and therefore the resolution may not be quite as high either. So I'm not going to necessarily provide too much optimism to say that it's completely disintegrating, but it does appear, at least based on what we're seeing, to have somewhat of a weakening factor.
And Matt, you said something so interesting to me earlier, just a little bit ago, that these are really pocket situations. I have a friend in Bern just now texting me saying there's really nothing going on, and that's due south of right where we're looking at right now.
Yeah, so there's Decatur. So on the north side of Decatur, likely if you were to look north, you would see lots of lightning, quite a bit of heavy rain. But yeah, Bern, nothing. Nothing's happening. In fact, Bern is not even in the severe thunderstorm warning. And if we looked at the trajectory of these storms, Bern may miss, of course, this kind of blockbuster of a storm right here. But there are some showers and storms on the kind of southwest side of the viewing area, so Wabash, Huntington County seeing this, that will likely hit Huntington, Bluffton, Bern. Whether or not those are quite severe remain to be seen. Again, what we're seeing on the south side of Fort Wayne seems to be the strongest signal of some gusty wind that we've seen across the entire area so far. So that goes back, Linda, to what you were saying, that this is more spotty. We are not expecting a widespread tornado outbreak. In fact, I would be surprised if we actually saw a tornado. My thinking again here is more of that wind damage possibility. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out just a little bit to give some perspective. This is a good thing to do, especially in the middle of tornado coverage. Sometimes we can be zoomed in so tightly in one area that a lot of individuals start to get a little nervous thinking about what else is in store. The good news is, as this front continues to move south and eastward, it is going to bring a less of a threat of severe weather. In fact, on the north side of Fort Wayne and looking north and west into northwest Indiana, the severe weather threat is pretty much done for you. You can see that front as it's moving south and eastward, and everything kind of north and west of that line is clear. There's nothing happening. So northern Whitley County, Kosciuszko, Noble, LaGrange, Steuben counties look good. The line, though, is making progress through Allen County, Northern Wells, Adams, and Van Wert counties, and Paulding County as well. And therefore, that is why we're kind of focusing mostly on this region and areas south and east. You can see those kind of polygons, those shapes that indicate kind of where this is headed, to the south and to the east. And so that's why, again, most of our focus is there. As I'm continuing to look over some information that we're getting, looks like there's some large limbs down along Hoagland Road, and looks like Storm Tracker. We have Storm Tracker out? Oh, okay. So it looks like we've got coverage on ABC and NBC for those tuning in. But I wanted to just kind of go back. I know that sometimes things can seem repetitive. That's the nature of severe weather coverage. Not everyone tunes in at the same time. So I'm just going to repeat some of the stuff I've been saying. We are watching a cell that's essentially moving into Monroeville now, heading south and east, that has been tornado warned. But what we're seeing as far as the velocity signatures are concerned are some very strong gusty winds. So again, regardless of whether or not any rotation occurs within this storm, we feel very confident in saying that one of the bigger risks is the damaging wind threat. And there's another feature here right along 33 and 27 that could produce some pretty strong wind too. You see kind of this almost orangish yellow color near Winchester Road. I'm going to put this tool in here. So about 60, perhaps 65 miles per hour, just north of Poe. That is a potential gusty wind damage, an area that could see some wind damage just to the east of Bluffton Road. So again, keep this in mind. This is between Hessen Castle and Winchester Road along 27. We're seeing a blip here on velocity that would seem to suggest some very intense wind, among the most intense. And it's always, over the past 10 minutes, it's consistently been in this area, just south of Hessen Castle, toward Monroeville. And in fact, in the tornado-warned region, the wind signature does seem to be a lot more flush with kind of the color scheme here indicating perhaps some lighter winds, but it's also good to keep in mind the farther east we go, the farther we're getting from the radar beam. And so things are naturally going to look a little, quote, better farther away from the radar beam because the resolution gets a little bit lower. The radar beam is capturing elements higher up in the sky. And so I wouldn't necessarily trust that this system is completely falling apart because of its distance from the radar beam. There's still the possibility of some very high wind, perhaps some rotation, but again, I have to admit, I'm just not really seeing a lot of rotation that would signify a high tornado threat, perhaps to put some at ease, but I would say, again, the wind threat appears to be very real.
And that wind threat, that second round, if you will, that you were just now talking about, Matt, it seems to be very close to that original area that was a little bit further west and moving into southeast Allen County there. And something I thought was just phenomenal, when you pull up the graphic with the lightning strikes.
Oh, yeah.
This has been incredible to watch the number of lightning strikes increase dramatically just in the seconds and moments you've been on the air.
Yeah, this cell extends essentially from southwest Allen County through central Paulding County. But what we can do is actually take a look at how many strikes are within this area, about 345. Wow. So this is a loud storm, lots of energy. But one of the reasons, too, why we're seeing so much lightning is also because there's a big hail component. And I understand we have a live video here real quick, but I wanted to show this hail analysis indicating on north side of Adams County, southern Allen County, in that tornado-warned area, we're also seeing large hail. So it isn't just strong wind. It's not just the potential for some rotation, but also some large hail. Sycamore Hills, is that where this video is, the southwest side of town?
This is Sycamore Hills.
Yep, and we're
that's
seeing,
what we're hearing.
Seeing some trees down. I'm seeing reports from the National Weather Service chat room area, too, that there are trees down that are healthy with 2 to 5 inch diameter. So some are a little bit smaller, but 5 inches in diameter. We got some of these big healthy trees that just could not stand up to some of these wind gusts that are likely over 60 miles an hour.
And Matt, work with me here. You're much better at directions probably than I am. But if this is the Sycamore Hills neighborhood, folks, if you don't know where that's located, that is in southwest Allen County. And I'm wondering, pretty much due west of this line of gusts and winds, strong winds you've been talking about from the very southern portion of Allen County going east, Matt. So I'm wondering, it's all connected probably, right?
Yeah, it is. There's been a very consistent sweep from essentially a Beloit down through Hessen Castle and then toward Monroeville, kind of like almost not quite a perfect U shape, but here, I'll show you on our maps kind of what we've been seeing. So here we are on the southwest side of town, kind of close to where we've been seeing some of this damage. So look at these light blips. Whenever you see kind of a light yellowish orangish color, that indicates gusts over 60. So you can see that blip right around Beloit, south of Covington Dells toward Waynedale. And then I'm going to move south here. Then this moved toward Hessen Castle.
There you go, yeah.
And then Monroeville. But after that first area went through, if you go back to that same area, there were a few more blips, mainly toward Waynedale, that offered perhaps some wind gusts that were closer to maybe 55 to 60 miles per hour. So there were like a couple brief waves of very, very intense wind. Fortunately, that signature we were seeing along Winchester, now along Hoagland Road, that potentially could have brought 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts appears to be somewhat weakening. We're at about 55, maybe 60 miles per hour. That would seem to make sense. The nature of a lot of these cells has been to what we call pulse, and in other words, kind of grow and then collapse and then grow a little bit and provide kind of a pulsing motion as they move south and eastward. That's maybe one of the more fortunate things about these storms is that there isn't a long-lasting intensity. They seem to have a burst of energy, as sometimes these storms do with these strong downdrafts, but then once they've been sapped of that energy, it takes a while to get it rebuilt again. So that would be some good news here on the southeast side of town, which is still, by the way, under that tornado warning. I do want to mention that. We're not ignoring that necessarily. It's just that we're not getting any additional information from this region other than that risk is still alive and well, although I would say that the area that prompted the tornado warning is actually now south of that region, now just north of Decatur, headed, I would say, closer to Wren into what would be southwest Van Wert County into Mercer County. And I'll kind of put that on motion here. You can see that cell looked like it was headed right toward Monroeville and then kind of took a dive south and is now kind of on the north side of Adams County. And when we take a look at those velocity signatures, that's where we're also seeing some of the strongest wind. But again, outside of maybe some broad rotation, there just appears to be mostly a strong straight line wind.
And Matt, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, please.
Let's say someone's in northwest Allen County right now. They're up in the Huntertown area. They saw some heavy wind, rain at least earlier. But if they're living up there, they're not seeing much of this at all, what the folks in southeast Allen County are going through right now. Exactly what are they going through? The high winds, the lightning strikes, we've got some thunder, heavy rain. Yeah,
earlier this evening, about 4 to 5 p.m., we were seeing some pretty strong signatures between Churubusco, Huntertown, and Grable. But you can see, again, that pulsing nature of the storm that kind of collapsed. So there were some strong wind gusts on the north side. But yeah, for those tuning in on the north side of Fort Wayne, just a few scattered showers right now. There really isn't a whole lot other than some hit and miss showers. Let's try on the lightning tracker to see how much lightning we have. But yep, none. There's really no lightning even in any of these cells on the north side. So that's the good news. I am noticing a lot of improvement on the north side of the city. We're not really seeing any renewed development. So in southwest Michigan, northwest Indiana, things look pretty good. It's mostly now south and east of Fort Wayne, the city of Fort Wayne, where we're seeing some of the heaviest downpours, strongest wind, vivid lightning, large hail. It looks like we have an upturned tree. Let's take a look at this live shot. Yeah, wow, look at that. Uprooted. And this is, I presume, it's still on the southwest side of town in Sycamore Hills. And an area that I think many remember just last year, the derecho that moved through and ravaged portions of the southwest side of town. This seems to be an area, unfortunately, it's been a bit of a hot spot, the southwest part of the city, of seeing some of these intense wind gusts, straight line wind gusts. And yes, this would have been caused what appears to be straight line wind. There didn't really appear to be any rotation as that cell moved through the southwest side of town. But to be fair, I'm not really noticing much on the southeast side either. But I keep emphasizing, while I am relaying the information that I'm not really seeing much in the way of rotation, does not mean to not take the tornado warning seriously. Any tornado warning that's issued has the capability of producing rotation that could then produce a tornado. So take every warning and heed it very seriously. I'm just trying to relay as honestly and confidently as I can what I'm seeing. And again, I'm mostly just seeing straight line wind speeds of about 50 to 60 miles per hour. That is mostly now affecting areas about northeast Wells County through northern Adams County. This appears to be the area to watch now. I'm going to circle this for you. And Decatur would be included in this, as well as Wren Convoy, with some of the strongest wind. Monroeville, the heaviest rain, the largest hail threat, the strongest wind threat is now out of your region. Still going to be pretty breezy, and we still have to watch the trajectory here of some of this stronger wind on the southern side of Allen County. But even this, I expect to continue to move south and east into northern Adams County. So anyone watching from northern Adams County, again, be prepared for some very strong wind. The tornado warning has not necessarily been extended to include Adams County at this point. So fortunately, we're not having to report any additional warning in that case. All right. Sorry, I just clicked on kind of another feature here. I wanted to make sure the warnings were up so we can get some updated information on where they are. There is a large severe thunderstorm warning. Looks like they kind of updated this warning, by the way, to include southern Allen County, northeastern Wells, basically the northern half of Adams County, and then all of Van Wert County and southwestern Paulding County. Within this large severe thunderstorm warning, we do have that tornado warning that continues. And looking at the National Weather Service chat room, they're also reporting what we've been discussing, which were those trees down on the southwest side of town. Reports of hail 2 inches in diameter, by the way, in St. Joseph, Elkhart counties, even Noble County, about 1/4 inch in diameter. So we've certainly had, there's been lots of evidence of some large hail north and west of the city. South and east, the bigger story seems to be the wind now, and we expect that to continue as this moves into northwest Ohio. If we do have viewers watching from northwest Ohio, unfortunately, I do expect that the wind could get stronger as it continues to move into portions of Van Wert and Mercer County. This is a line that will continue to move south and east, but there are some better dynamics in northwest Ohio that could support continued storm growth and development. So I would be very watchful, very careful in Van Wert, Mercer counties in particular, even Adams County, as this continues to sag south and eastward. It could whip up some very strong wind and the potential for a little bit of rotation.
All right, Matt, you had a much larger area that was a severe thunderstorm warning area. You just mentioned a second ago. It has been expanded as far as how large an area it is. The difference between a warning and a watch. Right now, anybody in that warning needs to listen very carefully to what you're telling them, right?
Yeah, warning means severe weather is imminent. A watch means we're just watching for the potential of severe storm development. But yeah, the warning that's in effect for the southeast side of Fort Wayne and pretty much everyone south and east of Fort Wayne at this point means that severe weather has either been confirmed, and in some cases it has, or it's very likely to happen.
And that means if you've got plans of heading out and driving somewhere in this area, we would advise you to at least wait the storm out. Yes?
Yes, southern Allen County, I would definitely advise waiting. I will say, if you are north of Fort Wayne, there are still some scattered showers about, but the severe weather threat appears to be decreasing significantly, again, north of the city. But this is another live look on the southwest side of town. There's our reporter, Alex Knoll. And just kind of assessing the situation and looking at just one of many reports of either trees uprooted or limbs snapped. This just appears to be one of those situations where, it can be unfortunately right under a very strong downdraft, strong gust of wind that can produce those damaging results, such as, again, the trees being uprooted.
Once again, folks, if you're in this area where the warnings have been issued, you are advised to get to a safe place. If you have a basement, you should be down there. We hope that you can watch us, but if not, it's okay. Get to where you can be safe with you and your family. If you do not have a basement, an interior room with no windows, like a closet or maybe a bathroom. I've often hopped in the bathtub with the dogs during the evening when, if I'm by myself and we get a warning. It's the safest thing you can do in conditions like this because you just really don't know what could happen next.
Yes. And, we've had some people snicker. I'll go to elementary schools and say, if you have nowhere else to go and a bathtub is the only place you can hide, go in a bathtub and put on a bicycle helmet. And the kids will laugh and they think it's kind of silly. But think about it. I mean, if you're in a one-story home and a roof is peeled off and you have debris flying around, you need to protect the most important part of your body.
That's right.
And that's the noggin. So make sure if you have a bicycle helmet around, it might seem silly, but you'll be glad you had it if there was any sort of damage that could cause injury.
And Krista had some great advice not long ago for all of us with little children, right?
Right. We had heard the same thing about car seats, putting your kid in a car seat because it's so safe and so secure that you could take your child in a car seat into the bathtub with you.
Wow.
So if we're talking about taking measures like that, who are we talking to right now, Matt?
Usually, we would say just tornado warnings. I mean, that means that a tornado is possible or imminent. But even some of these severe thunderstorm warnings with the potential for strong wind of 60 or 70 miles per hour can cause roof damage. It can cause some significant damage. So that might even be a situation where, again, if you don't have any other effective place to take cover, that may be an appropriate action to take.
Yeah, a lot of us have learned from the derecho about a year ago and other straight line wind episodes. We've learned how important that is.
We have, and we get many of those. Every year we can get straight line wind damage. I did want to, I zoomed in a little earlier on Covington and Scott Road. We got a report of the 6-inch diameter tree limbs down. This is on Covington and Scott. And so, again, this is just one of many that we've been getting up to this point of some large trees down or tree limbs. And so this is just, again, one more. But we also have a storm tracker, which is in Sycamore Hills, tracking a tree uprooted and some other tree limbs down. The tornado warning continues in Monroeville for 2 more minutes, and I would not be surprised to see that expire. I'm going to actually zoom out a little more. Let's take off the lightning. Sometimes that can be a little cluttery. Most of what prompted the tornado warning has moved south and east, in fact, more towards northern Adams and into western Van Wert counties. So I wouldn't be shocked if the tornado warning was canceled. In fact, it could have maybe been canceled quite a bit earlier, given that a lot of those signals were put off to the south. But again, the tornado warning does remain in effect for a couple more minutes for Monroeville. Again, northern Adams and southwestern Van Wert counties still under a severe thunderstorm warning for the potential for some very, very high wind gusts. If we kind of look south and eastward along 224, just east of Decatur, there are some signals, again, of not just some high wind, but maybe even a bit of rotation, too. We're going to have to watch that one a little carefully. As I mentioned, these storms could become a little bit stronger as they enter northwest Ohio. There's actually quite a bit of severe thunderstorm warning headlines just to the south of Van Wert County. This is more towards just south of Lima and north of Dayton. So again, as we look at this situation as a whole, the bigger threat here continues to be the wind gusts. We've got 1 minute left of the tornado warning. I'm not seeing any new updates coming in, but we did have some live video of some trees uprooted. We've got lots of reports that indicate some tree damage, so I'm sure we're going to have a lot more to talk about as far as what this storm was able to do. But did we want to add
let's find out. Where is Storm Tracker, guys? We're showing this behind us. Southwest Allen County, southwest Fort Wayne. I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't Covington?
Yeah, it looks like Covington.
Yeah.
Yep, that hilly road. Yeah, you can tell. And that was the area, as I said, Covington and Scott. That seems to be an intersection at which there was a large tree down, 6-inch limb, and that was the report we got. This is through amateur radio, but still, in that general vicinity area that we've been covering with some of the wind damage already, we're going to have to continue to monitor the impacts of these cells as they continue to move south and east to see if they'll produce any more damage. The good news is the tornado warning is done.
Good. Okay.
Severe thunderstorm warnings continue. A new tornado warning certainly could be issued. I do not expect, though, that the tornado threat will continue to be a high one. As we mentioned at the beginning of the newscast, it's always been a low threat, The high wind gusts and large hail have always been the higher threat. So we'll continue to watch this. In the meantime, if you're in northern Adams, Van Wert counties, you are still under severe thunderstorm warnings. Strong wind gusts still expected for, I would say, the next 20 to 30 minutes. But we'll continue to track this. At this point, I don't know if we're going to be planning on going back to some news coverage, but I think as far as the tornado coverage is concerned, we've been able to clear that.
I think you've helped a lot of people.
For sure.
Definitely.
And you as well. Thank you for including the information you've had.
It's our job. You've brought it up before. It's our job to help keep people safe in moments like these. And, maybe sometimes program gets interrupted that you wanted to watch. Sorry about that, but we do have jobs, especially our weather team, to do is keep you safe and keep you informed. And we'll have much more after this break.